So there's a misconception that if you're single, you are incomplete, perhaps damaged, salvaged, and you won't be happy until you find your one. And that is not true. That is bullshit. It is a message that has been fed to us by media and advertising. The truth is, when you're single, you have the richest soil for growth. That's why I created this podcast. And unlike other podcasts, this one is host-driven, not guest-driven. That means I will be rotating health and wellness experts 3 times a week to give you the giant box of wellness crayons, not just the primary colors, so you can start building a meaningful life. It's time to give singlehood a cape. Today's host is Rena Martine. She was a Los Angeles County Deputy District Attorney for 14 years, where she specialized in sex crimes, child abuse, and domestic violence cases. Today, she continues to serve women as an intimacy coach, educator, TEDx speaker, and author, with a mission and a fire in her belly to help women love their bodies, experience deep intimacy, and of course have great sex, all shame-free. Enjoy, Rena Martine.
Hello, I am your host today, Women's Intimacy Coach Rena Martine, and today I'm joined by Chris Shatek. Chris spent over 2 decades as a radio personality in an industry where the partying and free drinks were flowing. It appeared he had it all, but behind the scenes, he was unhappy and drinking more and more. Chris decided he needed a massive change in order to live the life he truly wanted, so he kicked alcohol to the curb and began his mission helping others do the same so they too could get the lives they desired. He's now a sober life coach who helps high-functioning drinkers change their relationship with alcohol and reignite their lives. He lives with his wife and 5-year-old daughter in Minneapolis, St. Paul, Minnesota. Hello, Chris.
Hello, Rena. Good to see you. How you doing?
Likewise, I am doing fantastic. Thank you. Thank you so much for joining me today. And I'm really looking forward to us having a discussion about alcohol, relationships, and intimacy. And before we jump into that, I just want to put this out there for our listeners. You are sober. I am not sober. However, as an intimacy coach and through my own personal experience, I have a lot to say on the topic of alcohol, intimacy, sexuality, and relationships. So I think we're going to have a really nice, well-rounded conversation when it comes to that. So let's talk about it. When I bring up the word intimacy to you in the context of alcohol, what comes up for you?
It's interesting because my whole drinking life, which was 15 to 20 years or so, the intimacy thing always seemed to be related around alcohol. And so, when you take that kind of component away, the intimacy thing becomes a bit challenging. It's a little bit different. It's hard to navigate. You're not exactly sure what it looks like. And so I will say, getting alcohol out of my life has been wonderful in basically every aspect, right? It's been immensely better. The one area that's been the most challenging, though, has been the intimacy area, because it's like, well, how do we do this now? We've been able to be intimate when we've been drinking, kind of lubed up, if you will. So how do we do it now when we're both sober? And so I haven't quite figured that all out yet. But I will tell you that it can be amazing, to be intimate when you don't have, anything in your system. And it's just, you're able to kind of connect more deeply than when it's just kind of sloppy and that kind of stuff, which can be fun. Don't get me wrong, right? Some drunk intimacy can be a good time, right? But it's just different, I would say.
Yeah, and just so we're clear here, I know that intimacy is sometimes a polite euphemism that folks use for sex, and I don't want us to give the impression that we're just talking about sex here. So would you say that having intimate conversations in your relationship that there's been a bit of an adjustment period since going sober.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it's challenging at first because, you're so used to really, like me and my wife used to drink, both of us, like that was our relationship, was kind of built around, we met while we were drinking, we would sit on the couch and drink at night together. And so you take that away and it's different. And, it's hard to kind of get into certain intimacy topics just because when you're drinking, stuff comes a little bit easier to you, and you don't care as much, your inhibitions are lower. But when you don't have that crutch to lean on, it's like, oh boy, we really got to talk about this without having any sort of crutch. And so it can be tough. But what I've realized is it's tough in the beginning, but it gets easier because when you start having those conversations, you're able to actually go deeper on those conversations and have a real meaningful conversation. And you're able to both kind of lay it all out on the table. And, as awkward as it is in the beginning, the more you do it, the more you go, okay, you can start to understand each other a little bit better. And so that's, I guess, the biggest thing for me is like, it's awkward at first, just like pretty much anything, but at the end of it, like once you start doing it more, it gets more and more comfortable, and it gets deeper, I think. Then it's, with the alcohol, it's like, it's very surface level. And it's, that connection isn't as deep as when you're intimate, and you're both completely sober.
Yeah. And I would imagine that you tend to remember the conversations a bit better if you're sober than when you're drinking. Like remember them the next day kind of thing.
Yeah. Funny how that works, right?
Well, and I've been with my partner now for 4 years, and a few months into our relationship, he was starting a fitness challenge at his gym, and he decided, I'm going to go alcohol free. I believe it was for 8 weeks. And when I say a few months into our relationship, it was maybe like a month and a half to 2 months in. He and I had both been traveling a lot during that time separately. So it was really in the very early stages of our relationship. And I was scared shitless. Like, here's somebody I really care about. We're just in the good part where we're starting to get to know each other. We're going to happy hour, we're going to like the fancy cocktail bars. And now we're taking this off the table. And I'd never sober dated before, and certainly not sober dated with somebody who I met, when we were drinking. And I tend to agree with you. In the beginning, I was like, I don't think we're going to make it. I don't think we're going to make it. But it deepened that connection that we had. And it proved to me like, okay, this is real. This isn't just the booze talking. But yeah, that adjustment was really hard. And I know you as a coach, you talk a lot about, well, what do you do once you've taken alcohol out of your life? So what did that look like for you and your wife? What did you replace the drinking with? What does that look like now?
Yeah. And, it's just kind of funny talking about sober dating and all this stuff. It goes to show you like how alcohol is so ingrained into our society. Like it's everywhere. You want to go on a date, there's usually alcohol involved. You want to go to happy hour with coworkers, there's usually alcohol involved. Like it's so hard. And that's what I think, keeps a lot of people from actually going, I don't know if I can live an alcohol-free life, because it is everywhere. And so then you kind of throw in dating and intimacy, and it can be intimidating. And even like my wife and I have been together now for almost 10 years, and we are so comfortable with each other. And yet when we took the alcohol away, there was something missing there. There was like, there was something that it was harder to communicate at first. Now we've navigated it a little bit better. But yeah, it's just one of those things where if you go alcohol free, you do have to fill your time with what is your life going to look like, especially if it was a big part of it. And so for me and my wife, Ashley, we have really gotten into, like me personally, I've really gotten into my business, like my coaching business. I've tapped into my entrepreneurial side of me that used to be there when I was a kid, and then it got lost away from me. And I love getting back into that. And I love helping people. Like, that's one of the reasons why I was drinking. I worked in radio, as you mentioned there at the beginning, for 22 years. And I was so unhappy because I wasn't feeling fulfilled. I wasn't connecting with what I was doing. Wasn't making a difference in anybody's life. And I just felt so lost. And so the alcohol was my crutch. And so the good news is that when you take alcohol away, a lot of those parts of us that have been with us, like when we were younger or whatever, they're not lost. They've just been hibernating. And so you can kind of connect with those parts of you. And then you can also discover new parts of you that you've always thought about. And so, for me, like, I've went hiking in the last year, which I've never done in my life. I've just tried new experiences. And my wife and I have too. And just like being present with our daughter, not just kind of rushing through reading a story at bedtime so we can go back down to our drinking, like now getting into the story and reading the story in like character voices and just kind of fully being present with life. And so, yeah, it can be challenging at first, but it can also be very exciting. And that's one of the things I love helping my clients with is like, let's not focus on what we're giving up. Let's focus on what we're gaining and where we're going and how amazing our life can be if we kind of keep the lens like that.
And so what was the catalyst for you? Because I know when people discuss their sobriety journey, oftentimes the stories that we hear are the people who hit rock bottom, right? Who have reparations to make. And it doesn't sound like that was the case for you. And so I would love to know where that journey started for you of saying, hey, wait a second. Do I want to keep doing this? And what did that look like?
Yeah. It's true that a lot of people kind of think or wait until that rock bottom moment to make a change. And I really stress with my coaching business, like, you do not have to wait until you get there. I don't recommend waiting until you get there. Like, if your drinking is affecting you negatively, if it's making you feel like shit, if it's making you unhappy and you're on this constant hamster wheel of waking up feeling like crap in the morning, guilt, shame, regret, I'm never going to do this again. And then 5 o'clock rolls around and then you find yourself pouring a drink. And it's just this cycle that you're in. The longer you wait to do something about it, the harder it is to kind of move away from it. And so I had just had enough of banging my head against the wall and getting the same result. And I was just so miserable about my life. And I shouldn't have been, because I had a good life. I mean, I had a cool job on the radio, a beautiful wife, beautiful daughter. Things on paper looked great, but I just couldn't move away from the alcohol. And I just had my kind of threshold moment where I'm like, enough is enough. I had gotten fired from Apple and laid off from my radio career. And that was the universe's way. I look at it as going, we're going to push you out of your comfort zone because you're not doing it on your own. And I needed that. I needed to get that push. And because I was in the comfort zone, I was complacent, and I was letting fear drive my life because I was afraid of what an alcohol-free life would look like. So I just made the decision. I said to myself, if I'm going to have the life that I know I can be living, that I know I've dreamt about and I'm meant for, alcohol cannot be a part of it because it is holding me back. And so, I just kind of decided in that moment that enough was enough.
Mm-hmm. And what was that conversation like with Ashley?
Yeah. The interesting thing is, originally we were going to try to stop drinking together. And then I said, well, you know what, I don't think that's going to work, because with alcohol, it has to be your choice. You have to be ready. You have to want to change. Your why has to be strong enough, and you can't really force somebody else to come along with you. It's kind of like walking a tightrope, right? Like, they can walk behind you or in front of you, but not walk alongside of you. And so I said, you know what, I'm just going to do this on my own. And whether you want to keep drinking or not, it's totally up to you. But I got to do this for me. It's got to be my own journey. And so I stopped drinking. And then like a couple of months later, she noticed like the changes in me, the more presentness that I had. I was a better father, a better husband. I had more energy. I was just doing more things with my life. And she's like, you know what? I'm gonna stop too. And so she stopped, and now we're both
he's not
sober.
having.
And yeah, yeah. And it's just so crazy, because if you would have asked us a couple of years ago if we'd both be sober and loving our lives, we would have said, no way. There's no way, because I always thought if I get sober, it's going to mean that I'm going to feel like I'm depriving myself, or I'm missing out, that FOMO and all this stuff. And that's so not the case. And that's one thing I want people to know is like, man, your life, drinking alcohol for me and for many others, the more we drink it and get addicted to it, the smaller our world gets, and it just shrinks and shrinks and shrinks. And stopping drinking is like, it opens your whole world up, and all these opportunities start to come in, and the benefits are amazing. So, and I want to say too, there's a difference between stopping drinking and just forcing yourself to stay away from alcohol, and then embracing your alcohol-free life and falling in love with it. Because if you're doing that, the first thing, just stopping drinking and trying to stay away from it, it's hard to be happy with an alcohol-free life.
Yeah.
So there's a big difference there. And that's one of the things that I help my clients understand too. Like, not just forcing yourself to not do this thing that's been a big part of your life. That's hard to do, right? There's ways to do it that you can embrace it and love your life, rather than just like being unhappy because you can't drink.
Right. And that reframe of is this coming from a place of love or fear? Am I running away from the bad thing? Or is the reframe, I'm running toward the good thing? And that's what I'm hearing you say. As somebody who's not sober, but who's had a varying history with alcohol consumption, I can say I'm much more mindful about when I do it now. And I talk a lot about numbing when it comes to intimacy, because, Brene Brown, she describes these 3 shields to vulnerability. And we have numbing, we have perfectionism, and we have foreboding joy. But focusing on numbing, which is this idea that we're doing something to avoid having to sit with the hard emotions. And when I was in my marriage, I drank a lot. And it wasn't like I'm sitting there downing, a handle by myself. It was, I looked for any excuse I could to go out and party with my friends. Any excuse I could for me and my then husband to sit out back and just keep pouring whiskey after whiskey and sitting around the fire pit. But I definitely got to the point of blackout on a regular basis, because I was numbing the fact that I wasn't living in my truth by staying in that marriage. I was numbing having to sit with the reality of this life that I had created for myself. And since leaving that, I am so much more mindful of it. It is more social for me. I don't want to feel like shit the next day. Sometimes, I had my birthday recently. I celebrated. It was a fun night. I don't feel any shame in that. But I don't drink at home when I'm by myself. My partner and I, we live separately, and don't drink at home. Even us together, we have at the very minimum 1 sober night together a week. And we normally see each other about 4 times a week. So dedicated 1 sober night. So it's, going from someone who, I guess, I love to use food analogies, but going from somebody who would eat an entire pizza to herself to somebody who's like, oh no, I'll have a slice every once in a while. And that to me feels so good. So good. And so I want to encourage folks, whether they're ready to jump in and come work with you, Chris, and become totally sober, or whether you're not at that point yet, to examine and to question, is alcohol a numbing component in your life? Are you using it to escape the hard feelings? And so when you remove that from your life, Chris, you remove that ability to numb. What were the hard feelings that you now realize you were trying to escape?
It's so interesting because I just got off of a coaching session with somebody who is, she's 3 weeks into her sober journey. And that is one of the hardest parts, is dealing with these uncomfortable emotions that we've been suppressing with the alcohol. We've been numbing, we've been escaping. And so when you take that alcohol away, man, we got to face those things, and it can be uncomfortable, but it's also rewarding, because the only way really to get through them is to deal with them and to embrace them and face them head on. And so I needed to do that. One of the things that I needed to do, and this is what I help my clients with, is getting super honest, 100% accountability and responsibility for what's going on in your life. Alcohol is the second most addictive substance in the world, and it kills over 3 million people in the world every year. And so I always tell people, like, look, it's really not your fault that you got to this place, right? Because it's a big part of our society. And it's not like other drugs where you take it and you're hooked once. It's a slow burn. It's insidious. And at some point, we lose control over it. We can no longer take it or leave it. Some people do, right? And so it's not your fault necessarily that you got to this place, but it's 100% your responsibility to do something about it. And taking that ownership, having that honest conversation with yourself can seem difficult, but man, it is freeing, because what I needed to do was have that conversation with myself, and I needed to take care of all the things that I had been avoiding, all those little things that I didn't want to pull the thread on, because man, that was tough. I didn't want to go down that road. And I just did a video on this the other day, like, dealing with your shit is like the biggest life hack ever. Right? We all have shit that we let pile up and we don't want to deal with it. So we do whatever it is, a lot of the times, to numb it out and escape it and hope that it'll go away. It's like we drink because we think we're going to press fast forward on our problems and they're going to go away. But in reality, we're pressing pause and they're still there the next morning. So the only way to really kind of get where you want to go is by removing the alcohol and then confronting those negative emotions, those things that you've been avoiding. And it just has this way of, like, lifting a weight off your shoulders and, just feeling at peace with yourself finally, and contentment with yourself. For me, in my situation, at least. And it seems so hard, right? Like, most people, I think, are uncomfortable with that thought of having to deal with our negative or raw emotions without, like, having anything to numb them. And it can be raw, it can be uncomfortable, but that's all right. Like, it's supposed to be. Like, it's good to have that stress and anxiety and these problems to go through it, because you learn from it, and then you can move on, instead of it just ruminating through your whole body and your mind all the time, carrying it around with you. Like, ever since I started dealing with my shit, it's been amazing. And yet it's hard to deal with your shit when you're constantly drowning your shit in alcohol, So yeah, it's been a game changer.
Yeah. And I mean, just on the topic of dealing with your shit, like, I'm a huge fan of confronting your fears and doing fear journaling, because, as we know now, the overwhelming majority of our thoughts from one day to the next are exactly the same, and most of them are negative. And the overwhelming majority of those negative thoughts never actually materialize. So, what I tell folks is, look, the garbage is going to be kicking around in there anyway. The negative thought pattern. That's kind of what our brains are wired to do, because historically speaking, it was better for our survival to remember the tiger who killed our family member than it was for us to remember the pretty flower on the side of the road. So your brain is doing what it's wired to do. It's to calculate and ruminate over past things, and then also protect yourself in the future. So instead of getting angry and frustrated, say, I'm going to take my fears and do my emotional colonic, which is my crass metaphor that I use, which is, okay, dump them on the paper. Dump the fears, dump the worry, dump the garbage on the paper first thing in the morning, to clear up space for gratitudes and brags and all these other things. But I think what I'm hearing you say is, With alcohol, you don't need to dump anything on the paper because the alcohol basically kind of takes an eraser to it temporarily, and then it comes up again. And instead of putting it on the paper, then you just have you have some more alcohol and you take the eraser to it again. But then of course it becomes this cycle where if you can actually manage your fears to begin with, that could improve your relationship with alcohol too, right? Almost going at it from a different perspective. So yeah. And, my focus is intimacy, obviously. And if we're not vulnerable, if we're shielding ourselves from vulnerability, if we are numbing, we can't be intimate with other people because we're hiding who we truly are. It's like we're at a costume party and I'm dressed up as Marilyn Monroe and I have to act like I'm Marilyn Monroe even after Halloween's over. Like, you are putting on a facade, you're putting on a persona, and that's really psychologically taxing to have to pretend to be someone else. And that's exactly what you do when you numb. So let me ask you, because I want to talk a little bit about dating and what the dynamics like where one person is sober and the other one isn't. So when you and Ashley, obviously you weren't dating, you two are married, but when you got sober and there was that 2-month window before she decided to give up alcohol, what was there any sort of tension or resentment or envy? I mean, what was that emotional dynamic like for you two?
Yeah, it was a little bit weird. We actually went on a vacation when I had stopped drinking and she was still drinking, and were able to be intimate because she was able, when she drinks, she was able to kind of loosen up a little bit, get out of her head, and and so that was fine. And so, but since she quit drinking, it's been a little bit more challenging for her and for me, just because it's new waters that we're navigating on how to approach it, how to get to that place where we do feel vulnerable with each other. Because I will tell you, from my perspective, you're right about the mask thing. And I feel like the mask is off with me now. I used to be playing a role, dumbing myself down to try to get other people to like me. And since getting alcohol in my life and becoming a coach, man, I'm just like, this is me, and I'm embracing myself for who I am. And I'm comfortable with that. But when your partner is not necessarily there, it can be challenging to kind of get to that place. And so, I really don't have the best answer on that, because, we're still kind of navigating through that ourselves. But being that we're able to have those conversations completely sober, and it's allowed us to cut the shit and just be like, look, this is the elephant in the room. It's weird to be intimate without kind of lubing ourselves up. So what are we going to do about it? And that has allowed us to get that conversation going and really kind of go to a deeper level than we ever really have in our relationship. So that's what I will say about being sober, is getting to that deeper level and getting below the surface. But yeah, it can be challenging if you are still drinking and the other person is not. And that, I hear that a lot. But some people make it work just fine. It's interesting because the sex drive can change dramatically when you take alcohol away. The drive will go away for some people. It'll increase for some people. And so there's really there's no this is how it always is for people. So it can be challenging,
Yeah. I mean, it's tricky because there's actually been research done that shows that a moderate and mild amount of alcohol can have positive effects on people's sex lives, especially for women, because many of us are pushing back against a society that shames us for our sexuality. And so using just the smallest bit that you need just to remove some of that judgment that you did not choose to have, that can be helpful. I think ideally we'll get to a place where we don't need that. But that brings me to another question, because there's also been a tremendous amount of research that's starting to be done when it comes to THC use and female sexuality. And so where we've talked a lot about alcohol, where does other drug use fit into this for you in terms of the larger conversation we're having about it impacting your life? Is it for drugs that perhaps aren't quite as dangerous as alcohol? Do you lump those into the same category, or is that a distinct beast for you?
No, I don't lump them into the same category. And I think that can be a misconception sometimes. I don't even like using the word sober necessarily, because that means somber to a lot of people. That means dull. That means like, ugh, God. And that is not my life at all. Alcohol is the only drug that makes people violent. Alcohol makes you, have a hangover. It has a lot of negative effects. THC makes you giggly and gives you the munchies and, makes you... puts you in a good mood.
Really
so, because I'll have people. Oh yeah, me too. It does the paranoia thing for me too, and so that's why I will dabble in it occasionally. But the paranoia I don't like, because it makes me go, ugh, and then I'll stay up all night long thinking, all these terrible thoughts. So, and my wife does not like THC at all. She gets super paranoid. But what we found, this is super cool, is that with the new kind of stuff that's on the market, there's a growing space for non-alcoholic beverages. Like it's massive. It grew by 33% last year alone, the non-alcoholic beverage space. And there's alternatives. There's CBD drinks. There's THC drinks. There's a little bit of CBD and THC. There's all sorts of stuff, adaptogen drinks and stuff like that. And so I always encourage people to go explore. Like, I'm not against people having those. Like, my thing is alcohol. I want to get people off of alcohol or change their relationship with it, because I know how damaging that can be. But sometimes if people need to bridge that gap to getting from going alcohol free, and kind of needing that, if you want to dabble into that, go ahead. Like, yourself, that if you're addicted to this, then you're going to get addicted to this, then don't do it. Right. And that could be said with non-alcoholic beers and stuff like that. Some people are like, no, don't go down that road. I'm not one of those people. Like, I will still every once in a while have a non-alcoholic drink or a beer or whatever, because it's like, it kind of makes me feel like, all right, the taste, it brings me back. So every person is different, and so they have now THC beverages where I'm at in Minnesota, and it's a very small amount, and I've found that to be like a perfect thing. Every once in a while my wife and I will have one, and she, again, she doesn't like really THC at all, but those don't make her paranoid. They don't make me paranoid. They give you a very calm, relaxing feeling, no hangover, no guilt, none of this, getting sloppy. I was a sloppy drinker. I was an emotional drinker, like none of that crap. So yeah, that's the good news, right? Like, and I think the younger generation too has gone, do I really want to be drinking and feeling like crap? Like, there's got to be other ways to kind of go out with people and be social or relax or whatever it is that you want to do. And so there are plenty of alternatives.
Yeah, there really are. And it's not like the weed you and I grew up with. Like the weed now, there's so many different kinds, and some are much stronger than the weed that folks our age, I think I'm a little bit older than you, but folks our age grew up with. But again, there's so many different products. There's so many sexual wellness products now that are just topical, that have THC in them, or tinctures that you can use that are kind of a hybrid between or somewhere in the middle between THC and CBD, that just get you in a more relaxed state, to where the daily to-do list and all the buzz that is often kicking around in our heads when we're trying to get sexually intimate with someone, that gets a chance to take the back seat. But I think you're right that if we can use tools, I hate to use the term crutch, but if we can use tools to help us bridge that gap and away from something like alcohol that is as toxic as it is, then let's make friends with that instead of being black or white puritanical about it.
Yeah, totally agree. I mean, what a time we live in, right? We got all sorts of options these days, because it can be, the intimacy thing can be difficult to navigate. And, a little bit of lube, both, in both sense of the word, to help us get us in the mood, or help us, drop that shield a little bit. Like, why not? Right. I think that's totally cool.
Yeah. Well, I feel like we could talk all day, Chris, but where can people find
I know,
you?
right?
if they want to learn more about what you do and are curious about getting alcohol free, where can folks find you?
So my website is sobercoachchris.com, and you can contact me there. I have a ton of videos on TikTok, and again, the handle is @SoberCoachChris, Chris with a CH. And Instagram. I have a Facebook group called Freedom from Alcohol. But if you go to my website, sobercoachchris.com, you'll be able to get a link to all that stuff.
Fantastic. And if you'd like to find me, I am at renamartine.com, or you can find me on Instagram _Rena.Martine _. Thank you so much, Chris, and have a lovely rest of your day.
Thank you, Rena. You as well.
I hope that episode was helpful. Hey, listen, if you want to share your singlehood journey, if you've gone somewhere and come back, if you have revelations and wisdom, please share your story. It's going to help other people. Nothing makes us feel more connected than hearing other people's stories. So just send me the audio of your story, and you could just record it directly from your phone and email it to theangrytherapist@gmail.com. Also, if you want our Single on Purpose newsletter, go to singleonpurpose.life. That's singleonpurpose.life. You will get tools and articles and other people's stories, and also Zoom links to private gathers. So if you want to join our community, go to singleonpurpose.life. Thank you for listening. Be well. We hope you tell a friend.
My takeaway in singlehood, what I have learned, that I embrace my solitude. I actually have fallen in love with myself, and taking myself on the dates that I desire, fine dining, movie alone, getting dressed up, and putting on nice makeup. What I have learned through singlehood is that what I truly desire is within myself, and whoever I meet is just a cherry on top. So I wish for the best for everybody to reach to that bliss of enjoying your own company.